Today, joined on the phone by author Ray Padgett. His new book, Cover Me, The Stories Behind the Greatest Cover Songs of All Time, is out now. Hey, Ray, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk a bit about your new book, Cover Me, The Stories Behind the Greatest Cover Songs of All Time. What are the listeners in for with the book?
Well, I picked 20 songs to really dive deep into, and I did a bunch of original interviews with, David Byrne and Roger Daltrey and Weird Al, trying to tell the history of the cover song, but through, some of the most interesting and wild and crazy and fascinating stories of specific cover songs through the decades.
Well, obviously, there's been hundreds and thousands of cover songs over the years, but what, in your opinion, I guess, makes a great cover song?
Well, the first criteria to be a great cover song is you have to change something from the original. There's no point in covering a song if you're just going to recreate it note for note from the original for your own recording. Someone can just listen to the original. So once you do that, I think more generally you have to find something of yourself in the song. You have to listen to the song, say, this is a great song, I love this song, but, I can make it my own in some way. For instance, I write about Whitney Houston covering I Will Always Love You, which originally was a Dolly Parton song, so, a very country song. Whitney Houston heard it and said, well, I'm not a country singer, so she made it this amazing soul song that's very different than the Dolly Parton version. So that's an example of, I think all 20 songs in the book are that to some degree, where the musician heard the original, said, that's good, but I think I can do something different with it.
Yeah, there are some of those songs out there. I mean, the covers have become so iconic. You sometimes forget, like maybe a Hound Dog, wasn't really an Elvis song, or, Aretha Franklin didn't write Respect. You kind of, they have such a iconic sound to them that you forget that they were done by somebody else.
Yeah, they kind of eclipsed the originals. There's long lists of songs that a lot of people don't know were covers. And Aretha Franklin Respect is a great example. That was an Otis Redding song. And it was, it did okay for Otis Redding, but Aretha took it, she rearranged it, she added all the parts, you think of as being iconic with that song, like the R-E-S-P-E-C-T part. She had a funny quote where she said, I thought we had to spell it out. So she totally made it her own, and you're right, the Otis Redding version is sort of eclipsed in history.
Again, Ray Padgett with us, author of the new book, Cover Me, The Stories Behind the Greatest Cover Songs of All Time. And I imagine, Ray, it must have been difficult to narrow it down to just the ones you did for the book. I'm sure you could easily do a few more volumes of this one down the road.
Yeah, it was difficult. Pretty early on, I made a list of all the songs I might want to write about. And it was like 200 songs. And I decided, I don't want to just write sort of an encyclopedia. I want it to be a book that someone could sit down and actually read and enjoy, rather than like a reference guide with, 2 sentences per song. So I narrowed it down by, first of all, they're great songs, but second of all, songs with really interesting and compelling stories with, interesting characters and funny figures and interactions, rather than just, my manager told me to cover the song and then I did, the end. There had to be better stories than that to make the book.
Well, and the book looks great as well, and you don't really just touch on the songs themselves, but you really kind of look at the whole art of the cover song, as you mentioned, over the years. So, I mean, it's a great twist on things.
Well, thank you. That was sort of the goal, is picking songs that, aren't, when I write about Devo Satisfaction, it's about Devo covering Satisfaction, for sure, but it also, touches on how you license a cover song, because there's an amazing story about them having to meet Mick Jagger to get his permission to cover a song, because their cover is so different. And so that's, sort of an example of it's a great story in of itself, but it also sheds some light on the phenomenon of the cover song as a whole.
So in your research, Ray, did you find a lot of artists sometimes maybe didn't want their songs to be covered, or maybe denied the people the right to do it?
It happens. Most artists, I think, by and large, are in support of people covering their song. For one, it's, a nice acknowledgement that your song means something to somebody, but even on a more practical level, if someone covers your song, you make money from it. So for that reason alone, I think the bulk of artists are pro-covers, but there definitely are some who are not. For instance, I opened the book talking about Prince, who was very vocal. He didn't like cover songs. He didn't like people covering his songs, which of course is sort of ironic because, like, nothing compares to you, the Sinead O'Connor hit is a cover of a Prince song, and no one would know that song if she hadn't covered it. But the nice thing about covers is, in terms of the licensing, you don't need typically anyone's permission to cover a song. You have to pay them something, but you can cover a Prince song, whether or not he or now his estate wants you to. You just have to pay him a little bit.
Well, and I imagine the original artists must make a lot of money off of the song if it becomes popular. I always think of the Talking Heads hitting it big with Take Me to the River, and then after that, people kind of equate that song to the singing fish, I think. So, I mean, he made a lot of money off of that song.
Yeah, the Billy Bass. Yeah, if you write a song that gets covered a lot, you make money off of every single version, and that ties into another story in the book where Elvis Presley wanted to cover "I Will Always Love You," the Dolly Parton song, and she was thrilled. I mean, who wouldn't be? Elvis is going to cover your song. But he and his manager had sort of concocted a bit of a scam where every time Elvis covered a song by that point, he would demand half of the writing credit, even though he did not write any of it. And so Dolly Parton heard that and said, well, no, I wrote the song. I'm not giving you half of the credit for it, which, then she, in terms of making money, she had a funny quote later on when Whitney Houston covered it. She said, I was crushed when Elvis wouldn't cover my song, but then when Whitney Houston did, I made enough money to buy Graceland.
Well, Ray, you mentioned briefly before a chapter you had on Weird Al. I'm a huge fan of his. I think it's great you covered his polka medleys. That's definitely a different twist on things. Yeah,
that's one of the, shall we say, weirder chapters in the book, one of the more left field ones. But I'm a huge Weird Al fan, too. And I thought it was interesting. It was a way to talk about not only Weird Al, which alone is, he's one of the world's best interviews, so very funny chapter with his quotes, but also to talk about the difference between a parody and a cover, which we get into. My argument is that the parody is the cousin to the cover song, in the sense of a parody, you change the lyrics but keep the music. A cover, you change the music but keep the lyrics. And so I talked about that with Al, and we also get into, some how he gets permission for his parodies, how he gets permission for the polka medleys, because he's cramming together 10 hits of other people into 3 minutes. And so that requires a whole bunch of paperwork to get permission for all 10 of those hits. So it's a really interesting chapter for Weird Al fans for sure. But even if you're not, I think it sheds some light on some sort of lesser known aspects of the cover song.
Definitely. Again, the new book, Cover Me, the stories behind the greatest cover songs of all time, is out now. And I know, Ray, it kind of all started with your website, covermesongs.com. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that's been that just turned 10. I've been running this cover songs blog for 10 years. I started it in college when I heard a cover of the song Summertime, the Gershwin song, Summertime and the Living is Easy, one of the most covered songs ever. And I knew the song well. I'd heard a bunch of versions of it. But this version I heard in college was by a soul singer named Billy Stewart, and it was fast, and there were drum rolls and scatting and horns blaring. And I said, I didn't know that you could do this to a song. I didn't know you could change it so dramatically. And then that sort of led me down the rabbit hole of saying, what other covers are there that change the original songs that much? And 10 years later, I'm still just as interested.
Excellent. Well, I wish we had more time, Ray, but again, the new book, Cover Me, the stories behind the greatest cover songs of all time, is out. The book looks great, and I hope we can see some more down the road.
All right. Well, it's been fun. Thanks for chatting.
And again, that was author Ray Padgett. His book, Cover Me, the stories behind the greatest cover songs of all time, is available now. More info at his website, covermesongs.com.